Hello! How is everybody? Welcome to our bi-weekly dev stream. I am HB in place of Matt today. He couldn't be here, but in my place, I guess.
Yeah, I'm HB.
Yeah, we have Julian as a special guest. For those that don't know, Julian is our concept artist.
He's the Foxhole concept artist.
Yeah, that's what I said. He's our concept artist.
That we're a bigger team.
Yes. So he does everything that every single poster, every single concept art, every single design of like all the vehicles and armament and everything. He does it. And then we also at the very end there we have Matt.
Matt again.
We have Mark. Sorry, so many M's. Which is our lead in the project, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Sounds good.
How was this past 2 weeks?
It's good. It's good. It's not so crazy. It's been, I'd say, the craziness has settled, right? And
the sickness is
it's like
but sickness is also settling in a
plague in the office.
Yeah, a lot of people like we went through a gauntlet, as you all know, last fall. Getting update 20 out the door, that was huge. And then we came back to New Year's and we had to kind of there was still a lot more players playing the game than usual, and we had to quickly churn out a plan for 021. So 021 and the new year for us wasn't as calm as I would have liked it to be. But now that 021 is pretty much wrapping up, it's nice because it's like we can finally breathe and sort of like, you know what's funny? I think this last week is the first time that I feel like things are back to normal. I think that's my feeling on it. The last week to week and a half, it's like, okay, normal stress levels, normal,
which is still high. They're still pretty high, exactly.
Which is still pretty damn high. But speaking of update 21, that is pretty much almost out the door. So as soon as this war ends, we're gonna see that update.
So when is the release before? Like, if the war doesn't end, how many weeks are they gonna push this off?
I don't know. We'll see what happens. I mean, maybe we will intervene at some point, as we do sometimes, just to make sure that we can keep the updates rolling. But
so if you guys want your motorboat, you better end the war quick.
Yeah, I actually, it was funny. The last couple of times we said that, the war did end fairly quickly afterwards. So maybe it works, right?
Maybe people do pay attention to that.
The general way we do things is if it's like a really big update and we have like a solid date, because we're trying to coincide it with something else like a sale or like a promotion or something, then we tend to be a bit more strict about the dates. But when it's not a big release, when it's just kind of like normal release, then we tend to just wait out until the end of the war, because we don't want to intervene if we don't have to, right? So, but yeah, I mean, other than that, it's been cool. How's it been for you?
It's been interesting. I've been doing some cool stuff. What we had like the little, everybody knows already the vehicle we're adding, right? Like we said in the last dev stream.
Yeah, they've seen it.
Oh yeah. So like doing it was nice to come back from the break and have like a simple small vehicle like the motorboat. It was easy to do. From my part, it was very easy to do. It was nice. That also gave me a chance to like work a little bit on like some more like sitting animations that we may be able to like push into other places and stuff like that. So that was actually quite interesting. It was very slow. It was like a slow start, like to ramp it up for the beginning of a new year, right? And now there's a lot of cool things that we're working on.
Yeah, I was very surprised at the polish that was put into it, because when I first thought that we should do it, I was expecting it to just be like fairly static, but the detail that you guys put in with like the motor, the motor, whatever, the engine, being able, like the driver, the animations on the driver basically were a lot more like detailed, and the water effects were much more detailed, and the sound and everything, and it just really. It really pulled together. I think we're getting a lot better at doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if we're getting better. We're getting faster.
Scary thought.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you want to move on to?
Yeah. So we're gonna move on. Like always, we're gonna start with our community highlights snippets, which is just a small section of the full community highlights blog post. The blog post, Crazy Flying Chicken, gathers all the cool stuff that the community has done, puts it all together into a giant blog post that you guys can peruse at your own leisure time. It always comes up like a couple of days after the Devstream, but I try to highlight some of the cool things that I've seen beforehand and talk a little bit about it. So we're gonna start with that before going to development. There you go.
Great.
Yeah. So
cool.
First and foremost, these are 3 compositions by Superior. They are fantastic. Like the top one, like I almost feel like that one should be like our splash image. You know, like instead of like it just looks like a badass version of what we have, and I absolutely love it.
But those aren't Foxhole tanks on that horizon.
No, but doesn't mean we cannot do a version of it.
Well, I mean, I think they're kind of ambiguous enough that you can just kind of.
Nobody will notice.
Nobody will notice. But yeah, no, it's really cool. When I first saw this, my first thought was that I wanted to set this as a wallpaper.
That or it's a book cover or like comic book cover.
Oh,
if we ever did a Foxhole comic book, that's like the cover right there.
Kind of.
And the bottom right one is the romance novel.
Yeah, the bottom.
Yeah. No, it's cool. It does look like, or it looks like it could be like a movie poster if it was cut to like a vertical profile.
And the bottom left one is our Battlefield 5 Foxhole like box cover art right there. So the Foxhole FPS box cover
Actually,
art.
the one at the top would be the Battlefield poster, except if the character was flipped the other way around
and had orange lens flare.
orange lens flare on it. That's like Battlefield Foxhole. Cool.
Yeah, no, I thought it was amazing. This one by Colonial Press. We're having more and more people being like press in some way, shape, or form. We have the Radiant Warden coming back with Commissar Jimbo. At least I know that Commissar Jimbo is back into the community. For those that don't know, he was kind of like one of the first ones that started like blasting like music and making radio shows in regards to Foxhole. So he's back in the community.
Real cool.
And in this one, we have the Colonial Press making a whole newspaper in regards to the last war that we had.
Right.
These are like full written stories and articles.
Yeah, it's not just using like stand-in text.
No, it's full written.
It's actually fully written. And this was based, it looks like from the casualty counts, this was based on the last war, because there's 1.5 million colonial casualties. You know what's crazy? How close those two numbers are?
I know, right?
Right? Yeah, still more colonial deaths, but man, that is very close. So
if we do another art contest and with like a written component, and Matt wants to put some stuff in game, having like lore newspapers in game with like snippets written by people could be a really cool like prize for a contest in the future. Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Actually, you know what? I think I was wrong. I think this is from this war. I think I was totally wrong. Because if you look at the dates, but I don't know. I'm sure someone in chat is like, you don't know what you're talking about. So my guess is that is from the current war. So
somebody's gonna answer for sure.
Yeah.
And last but not least, I thought that I saw this whole sequence of cute anime soldier foxhole girls. It was really weird. I don't know how to describe it, but I thought it was really cool. Really well drawn.
Yeah, well drawn.
Like extremely like charismatic, in a way. Like they have personalities. You can see what's going on the top left and things like that. What they're doing on the bottom right one. And I know that a lot of people are gonna accuse me of being just a giant weeb, which I am.
I accuse you.
Pretty much daily, but I loved it. I was so happy. I think that the DLC coming in 2024, Foxhole Anime, is gonna invest heavily on something like this.
I think we were commenting prior to the stream that the truck was really well done. Like
the truck is incredible.
It's like very accurate. Yeah.
But even like if you look at the bottom left one, you can see like everybody's like holding very realistic, like the mortar and the binocular and even the radio that she has.
Yeah,
they're like extremely on point to what we have in game as well.
Yeah, and they also have like the uniform. What uniforms would be like? They have like the naval. I'm assuming that's a naval uniform at the top center.
I assume so.
Then what's the uniform on the top left?
I don't know. It's the casual uniform.
I've been to the Jade Cove, and the only thing I got was this little T-shirt.
How about what is that at the bottom right? The character is holding something. That's just like a crate.
It's the crates.
It's a boom box.
It's a crate. They're having trouble carrying the crates because
it looks like
heavy.
It looks like the character that's on the truck is trying to like jump into that little container or something, but I'm totally reading it wrong.
Anyway, so yeah, this was really cool. I really loved everything that was done.
Actually, the one thing I didn't want to mention about this community highlights that unfortunately we didn't have time to put into these slides, but there was a lot of great videos. Like there was a whole bunch of like battle tank scenarios.
Yeah.
With like players throwing sticky bombs at battle tanks like driving through a large tank. Like I don't know what it is, but the last few weeks, like at least like 3 of them have been making the rounds on like our internal Discord, and a lot of them are really cool. So when you check out the community highlights, make sure you check out all the videos.
The community highlights snippets, the snippets that are doing here. I'm trying to avoid videos nowadays because we always have trouble with music.
Something goes wrong.
And then not only that, like music, and then the stream gets muted, and then when exported to YouTube, example. So I'm trying to avoid videos, but the cool thing is that besides this, there's a lot more. There's a lot more artists that I couldn't even feature. There's somebody that did something for I Saw a Bear. There's some other drawings. There's some drawings from. There's like battle tanks that are like fully rendered. It's really really cool. There's some videos. There's stories. There's different newspaper articles as well done. So there's a lot to check out. It's probably coming up in about 2 days if I'm not mistaken. Give it a shot, and if you haven't seen one of your stuff and you would like it for it to be featured, send it to KFC, to Crazy Flying Chicken on Discord. We try to take a look at everything, but sometimes things, we're only human, except Julian.
And there's way too much stuff.
There's
a
lot
I don't
of stuff.
want to boast, but
there's a lot of stuff.
There's way too much stuff. Cool.
So yeah, with this, we're gonna move on to our actually development update, and this one I know it's gonna be a special one because Julian is gonna be taking a lot of the reins
of it.
Yeah.
So
take it away.
We're sort of in this actually. To explain why we decided to do this week.
Matt was sick.
Besides the fact that Matt was sick, is because last year, towards the end of the year, when we were wrapping up the big update 20, Julian, he's a concept artist, which means that he's at the beginning of the pipeline always, which means that when we're at the end, Julian has to start something new, but because it was the end of the year and we hadn't necessarily planned out a whole lot of stuff for the new year yet, Julian went off to work on some ideas that he's been really excited about, and things that we have talked about in the past that he was finding time to work on. And some of this stuff is just at the exploratory phase, so which means some of these ideas are likely to change. You might not even see them for a few months. You might not even see them for a year. You might never see them. But there are things that
100% guaranteed. They're all in. The
Never, ever.
but there are things that we're really excited about, obviously, and I'm just gonna let Julian talk about it.
Cool.
Yeah.
At the end of last year, when everybody was cramped and like trying to get stuff done for the big Foundation of War update, Mark said, basically, I have free time and to finish the promo art, but then after that, get going on some new stuff. And basically, I had time to I could pick whatever I wanted to do. And I knew there was a few things I knew I wanted to do.
You want me to?
Yeah, go ahead. I know I've wanted to revamp the artillery, and I think I actually mentioned it on a dev stream in the past that or in a round table that we had on Discord, that the artillery model was actually made before I ever started working here. So I knew I wanted to do a revamp. I wanted to make the artillery look older than it is, and specifically the wheels and tires that are on the current one look super modern, like World War II modern. But I wanted to kind of take it back to when they just had these big old metallic wheels and whatnot, and really figure out how the artillery cannon, like how it recoiled properly and whatnot. This particular one wasn't going to be a major redesign, just kind of like a reskin of the colonial one that we already have in the game. I have done a Warden variant as well that we're saving for now. I fought Mark we got into a fist fight over putting it on the stream or not, and he won.
You're making me look like a bad guy.
But next is something that is, I think, more exciting because it's something not yet in the game. But obviously, with new tanks, we're going to need an infantry way to counter the tank. And the natural, I think, from anyone that knows World War II stuff, is an AT cannon. So basically, something that we wanted was to limit, or not limit, but reuse assets. So we wanted to basically reuse the chassis. Me and Mark had lots of conversations on how it's going to function in terms of, is this an upgrade to artillery? Is it a whole new vehicle that you'd build in the vehicle factory? And all of that stuff we haven't nailed down yet. And that's this is why it's still exploratory. This was just to get the ball rolling so that we could make a block-in model so that we could test this stuff out and figure out what's best for the game. But to be honest, we haven't even started doing that stuff yet.
Yeah, and I think one idea that we had talked about, which I've heard some of the players talk about, was possibly vehicles that where you can modify them, right?
Yeah.
Which I think you're about to get into more. So.
Oh yeah. Speaking of vehicle modification, then I think the next logical step after an AT gun, like a pushed one, is one on the back of a half track. And again, I went through, updated the existing concept of the old half tracks, and we were discussing, Mark and I were discussing, is this a modded vehicle? How would vehicle modifications work in game? And that's not just this vehicle, but all future vehicles, using this as kind of the test bed. We're still figuring out the gameplay implications as to modifying vehicles, where we'd also debated something that we didn't like was the way the character the second passenger stands in the back of the half track. We talked about how it's just ugly, it looks ugly in game. It's clunky to get up there, to vault up, it's clunky. Do we want to eliminate that? Yeah, if we do, how do we want to eliminate it? Should we cover the half track and have interior seats? Or should we have a seat with a seated pose, like what HB was mentioning, how he made new poses for the boat, like new seated poses? Could we basically, do we want more seated stuff going forward? Then on that seat, could you still shoot your gun? What guns could you shoot? Like all that still, we need to figure all of this out. And that's why we don't have a scheduled release date yet.
Yeah, and I think another one of the gameplay motivations for this is using this sort of a system to make the earlier vehicles in the tech tree more relevant in the later game, right? Because one of the complaints that we've heard is like some of the earlier vehicles, they stop being useful after you have like tanks. Why would you want something like an armored car? And what we want to see is to make the entire tree relevant at like all stages of the war. And this is one of the ideas that's kind of like floating around on how we can do that.
Also, even coming up with new ideas as to how would an AT cannon work like a giant sniper rifle? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. It's a cool, like, ideas are floating around that we're still figuring out. And we need the in-game model to test it, or at least a block-in version, and that's what these are for.
Actually, something that is cool is this is kind of similar to some of the fan art that we've seen in the past, where some of you guys have made some concepts where existing vehicles could be modified. Like I think we've seen a truck modification before that looked kind of cool. So
this is I think the community wants this stuff and have wanted it for a long time and have been yelling at us for a long time to get it done.
It's a complex feature.
Yeah. Well, it'll apply to every other vehicle in the game potentially. Like the armored car could have some alternate turret. Anything with a turret could potentially have an alternate turret, and we need to figure out how to do that in a foxhole way. First. Next. Next. This is from way back. For people who remember it, this is one of the first things I did for the project, like 2 years ago, when Mark and Matt wanted to see this kind of alternate World War II era world where things just kept getting bigger. Like the idea was that the war never ended, and the technology just kept getting kind of bigger, and armor got thicker, cannons got larger, and things got kind of like fantastical. So I did this. This was a very, very early idea of like the breach. And it spawned this interest in having, at some point, super vehicles that were scenery or part of like it kind of destroyed old relics from a older era or older war. And as you guys saw last stream, some mood art which had a more current thing, a giant thing stuck in the snow. And I wanted to just talk on kind of the process that got us to that. But first, the next image is something that I did immediately after this one that no one has seen yet, but one of the first we had an idea for an active gigantic tank. And like the little tank it's compared to doesn't look like anything that's in the game now. But that was like, we had no idea what tanks were going to look like when I did this at the time. That is the first ever weapon emblem, the little axe thing on the side of the tank, and that turned into the hatchet tank eventually. But that's the image there, which I thought was fun. I remember when Mark saw this, he said, "No, that looks too sci-fi." Like your comment.
That. I think that's why we never showed it.
Yeah, we never showed it, but this is just for fun. And these are the things that over the break, I took some time, and Mark Mark said, let's explore what a giant vehicle would look like that's an old relic stuck somewhere in the world. This effectively reiterating what we said 2 years ago, but I had time over the break. So I started doing some mood paintings, and the idea was not to flesh out a final design, but to get just a feeling of like the top right, it was kind of teetering over some water, or either like stuck in rocks on top left. while at the same time, the middle one, middle on the right, it wasn't necessarily a tank. It's not anything except it has a big gun on it. But that was kind of the point. We didn't yet know, was it gonna be a tank? Was it gonna be in, like, maybe it's a sub that came up through the ice or something stupid and got stuck. Or maybe it's a Northgate fortress. So I did a bunch of these drawings just to see, basically did a bunch of them and showed them all to Mark all at the same time, and then waited for him to point to the one that he wanted. It's just like immediate, yeah. It's like when they hold like a divining rod thing to try to find water. He just whichever direction you point on. And Mark ended up pointing towards the top right image on this and the bottom right image, saying that it gave him a feeling of like a giant kind of mobile fortress, like the vehicle would be giant and solid looking. And the top right one was, I started looking at the German Mao's like super tank, but then ours would have to be even bigger than that. I had a design restriction in quotes that it needed to have a turret on top, because we knew that this vehicle would eventually be the kind of I'll call it a base, because it's gonna be like an old relic when you see it in game. This counterpoint to Westgate needed to have a gun on top, because Westgate the original art had a gun on top, and it will eventually have a gun on top. But with that easy limitation, I just kept exploring, working on stuff, and eventually hit on what you guys saw last time, or like rendered up that one sketch that Mark liked, just so it had a bit more detail to it, but was still very much a mood painting without like the final design being done. I have since finished fully fleshed out the design, and this was another thing Mark and I got into a fist fight over as to whether or not to show you guys today, but Mark wants to hold on to that for later. But really, like, this is the very early concept stuff that I do when approached with a new task or a new goal, and this one's just cool because it's a giant tank.
Cool.
That's awesome.
Thanks for sharing that process.
Just
now our ugly faces again.
Yeah, that's really amazing.
Hopefully we'll be able to hear from you guys which of these concepts you like, what things that you would like to see from what we've shared, and hopefully at some point in the future we'll see some of the stuff in the game, not unlike the rocket, which we had showed very early on.
Oh yeah.
I think almost 3/4 of a year before it actually launched. And we had time to figure out how it could properly work. And we also like to hear how people think about it over time, because people were still asking about the rocket all the way in fall. Mm-hmm. And that's when we knew it was the right sign, right? So if we hear more about this, then, we'll know what you guys like.
But going back to we don't need to go through the slides again, but going back to the AT stuff, when you guys are mentioning, we know we've heard you guys mention the AT turrets and AT whatever a lot, but we're thinking about the exact same stuff too. Oftentimes it's also on our mind. And then we talk if we want to give you guys credit for coming up with it, or if we want to have credit for coming up with it. Doesn't matter. I'm just it's all this big. We all know what we all know stuff from World War II that we like. We all know this weapon is beats this. This was to counter this, and it's all kind of coming together now. More so than ever, we're getting everything in.
Yeah, and I also feel that the further we get along in the project, we get more and more on the same page with the players in a lot of cases, because it's we already know what they expect, and hopefully they know a little bit more about what we expect, and it's just sort of that's exactly what we already wanted to do. So this makes it really easy.
Thank you guys for being excited about stuff we already know we're gonna do, because it makes it way easier.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, people in the chat seem to be very excited. Some people are complaining that like we're wasting time doing concepts instead of fixing bugs.
I'll get right onto those bugs.
But
that
I just
want
to make sure that people understand that Julian cannot fix bugs. He's a concept artist.
Yeah, I can, but I will ruin the game because I don't know the code. Like I don't know coding, so
so don't worry. We have different teams working on separate parts. It's important for the team and for the game to things continue moving along. You know, for us to create new things and what is the next step while we're doing the next update. This is way far ahead.
Absolutely, and this is more just us sharing. Like we haven't actually begun like too much work on this particular stuff. And speaking about the bugs, we actually have knocked out a few of the bad ones in 021. So
I'll take credit for that
because Julian decided to fix some bugs while he was doing.
Finally, Julian.
So this is like what we show on this stream is not necessarily representative of what we're working on like right now.
Oh yeah.
It's usually a very long process in a lot of cases. So if you are concerned about things, just like make sure you let us know, and we'll be happy to share about where we are with stuff like bugs, right?
Yeah,
because we know that kind of stuff isn't.
Yeah, we don't have anything to hide in regards to that. We know like if there's a bug that we don't know, we're not aware of yet, that means that we have to first know about it and then fix it. If it's a bug that we are aware of, it might be in the list already. So there's nothing. Anyway, we're gonna move on. We're gonna go. Do we have anything else for?
No, I think we're good.
So yeah, right now we're gonna enter Q&A. So we're gonna start getting questions from the chat. So start sending us your questions. Let's see. Oh, this is the wrong mouse. Okay, a lot of people are asking if the travel on Umbra Wildwood was fixed on the 0.21.
Yes.
Good. Maybar66 is asking any news on the building update, because I know we mentioned a building update further ahead.
Yeah. So that I think is the next really big update that we're going to work on is going to be the base building update, and because of how big it's going to be, we're probably not going to see it that soon. We originally were going to work on it earlier this year, but it kind of extended out into larger plans, and it's probably one of the main big projects of this year, and it's coming. It's just I wouldn't hope for it to be coming anytime soon, but it's coming.
Okay, so Godzilla 1 million, I think, I didn't count. Devs, would you consider using the super weapons you have shown as a reward for conquering a skirmish region? For example, a battleship for conquering Tempest, or Fisherman's or a super tank special nuke for conquering Great March or Reaching Tail?
I think our goal, so I guess I'll answer that in two ways. Our goal is to really not have have a difference between skirmish and normal regions. In fact, I want to get rid of the word skirmish at some point, so that we don't really treat these as separate regions. And the hope is, as you'll see in the coming updates, that really we want everything to feel like it's in one world, right? And it's not separate. So that's one part of the answer. And the other part is that I think those ideas that you mentioned are really cool. And I think we are doing things that are, let me just say, going back to what we were talking about earlier, we also find that cool. And I think that like Julian and I
we've talked about a lot of stuff.
We talked about, in fact, as like recent as this week, we've talked about something similar to this question. I think it'll be cool to see old things you can you can reactivate and use, right?
Oh yes, definitely.
Yeah.
We have there's a plethora of people asking slight variations of the same question, so I'm just gonna catch all. What about trains? People are complaining about logi and complicated. When are we gonna add trains? Are we gonna add trains? Have you guys talked about trains? Have you thought about trains? What are your thoughts on trains, Mark? I know that we answered this question before, but you know, there's a lot of people asking.
Is that from Lek or?
It's from
There's actually a lot
the
of
whole
people.
community.
There's a lot of people,
Yeah.
and maybe it's people that are just new on the community.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, like okay, so the base building update, the vague plan there is that we're gonna do a lot with Logi as well, and I don't think trains is gonna be even later than the base building update. So I wouldn't hold your breath for that. I think we'd like to find. I think there's some more fundamental things with Logi that we would want to improve upon first, instead of just slapping on trains and saying it's fixed, because we don't think that's a good solution.
That and trains are a huge like problem in terms of like we have so much to figure out as to how they would work in game.
Yeah.
Like in turn, like do you lay down track? Is track already in the world?
Yeah.
Can you blow up any segment of track that you want? Like all this stuff, we have no idea. Where compared to like this like big kind of relic super weapons are going to be static building, in effect static buildings, and one of them's like Westgate's already in the game.
Yeah.
So like trains is a ridiculously large undertaking.
Train to us is like the final boss that we're going to get to eventually, and we have some ideas on how to do it, and some ideas on how it's going to fit into the current Logi game. But like I said, I think we don't want to just slap on trains and use that as a solution to Logi. We rather or rather the solution to some of the issues that we're seeing with Logi. We'd rather try to address those issues at a fundamental level, and then trains will be something that will like add to it, as opposed to like fixing a problem, right?
Mm-hmm. There was a couple people like Crater and Dexter asking about the fact that in-game clan and names and tags and stuff like that to be added to the game. I know we mentioned before. Is the plan still to add them in game so people don't have to change their name on Steam?
Yes, yeah. I think a lot of that stuff we put on hold because we want to wait until there's a lot of systems in the game that are old, and we're kind of last year, as I mentioned previously, was a transition year where we were replacing a lot of these old systems that were there from the prototypes, and kind of putting in the new system that we're going to live with for a very long time. And then, one example was like something like player operations and voice chat. We didn't want to do too much work in that department until we put in a new system. Another thing was like the world revamp. We didn't want to go ahead and make tons and tons of new maps and new structures in the towns until we figure that out, because we don't want to work with an old system. And I think very similarly why we've held off on a lot of these player profile type of issues, because we want to wait until we can replace that system, which is really old right now, and we don't want to build lots of we don't just want to slap on a lot of new features on top of an old system that we know is going to change, right? And changing that is going to be a huge undertaking. So the short answer is that yes, we're going to do it, but again, I wouldn't hold my breath for that.
Okay. There is Lack is actually asking not about trains and not about a serious question. He's asking about moderation to improvement, more in regard probably of players that are not moderators. So as of current, I feel that there's a need to be some sort of moderation tools improvement. I think a spectator mode with some other things are needed to improve the catch rate on cheaters and stuff like that for the community health. So what are your thoughts on moderation tools for the regular player? Things that help the moderators for the regular player.
Yeah, I mean, we'd like to hear more about your ideas on that. that is an area that we are going to focus on sooner rather than later. I'm not certain specifically if there's any exact things that we have planned for like player self moderation, but certainly we're constantly working to improve the mod tools for the mod team. And if there's any specific issues with self moderation, we'd like to hear about it. But yeah, we're open. I think that's one area that we can definitely spend some time on, right?
That's also an area that I can't help out with on the dev team, as well as the entire art department.
Yeah.
Okay. Whoa. Okay, there's a couple of questions in here. We still have some time. Some people are asking about a particular rework on a balance map of maps in regards to balance, to make sure the maps are more balanced. And at the same time, they're asking about if Great March and Reaching Trail are gonna be connected.
Yeah.
So what's happening to maps?
Yeah.
What about maps?
Yeah, that's actually something we're going to be working on a lot over the next few updates. Starting with 021, we've brought in Tempest Island and Fisherman's Row. And the plan is to bring in Reaching Trail and the Great March as well. And, you know, hopefully we'll see more. You know, again, the goal is for the world to not feel like, I think our feeling is that it's still a little bit like video gamey, or at least like too video gamey. It's always going to be a little bit like that, but it still feels too much like, okay, you have these 3 columns, and now it's more like, I guess you can kind of view it as 5 in 021, 5 columns.
Spoilers.
And these special like extra regions, and it's really video gamey, like there's skirmish maps, and what we wanted, you know, like our goal from the beginning is to really not make it feel like that, but to rather make it feel like one single world, where you don't, that feels much more organic than how it feels right now. Like I think this is one of the things that we want to do. Like right now, the world really feels like you're only traveling like up and down. Let's be real, like for the most part. We try to encourage people to go sideways, and it does happen on rare occasion. We've definitely seen it happen, but I would say the majority of the border incursions happen on the vertical axis, right, of the world, and we don't like that. We want it to not only happen on the horizontal axis, but maybe even like being able to go like northeast or like just so that people don't have this feeling like it's like basically 3 things you can move up and down. It should, like in a real war, you're not locked into columns, right? You're able to kind of walk anywhere, and obviously we have some limitations that we're working with, but the goal is to make it that like you can attack from anywhere, right? So hopefully we'll see not only these other regions incorporated into the one world, but to actually go further to make things feel a lot more natural.
Cool. Considering that there is more connections and maps that are connected through water, there's Terra Marine was asking, and I think somebody else, Blood and Aaron, Danica, any more work on water combat? Maybe adding more vehicles in water, more naval assets, more logistic options in water.
Yeah, that's all. I think that we want to do all that, and you know, obviously 021 is showing you guys that we're not finished with that. I think we'd also want to hear from you guys what you want to see with water. I think stuff like waterlogy, if we want to do it, we don't want to just like tack it on. We want it to be like a full-fledged thing, and we want it to really have like a real impact. Yeah, I have some exciting ideas. I've talked to some people on the team about some really exciting ideas on what we're gonna do there, what we'd like to do there eventually, and it's like beyond sort of the scope of the wars that we see right now, and it sort of brings it into this like larger scope of like you know, I guess more like naval warfare, which we haven't really, like right now the warfare isn't really naval in a way, like it's
back when we added like the barge and gunboats and the landing APC, the push was to make beach landing was the important part of that update at that time. So like we need to figure out a purely water update, like
that's right,
naval update kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And and then that's a big question. Like, how does naval work in a game like Foxhole? You know, just in terms of scale, it would be a little bit weird to have like these really large ships. But you know, it's an interesting thing. Maybe that should be the next thing that like you're gonna talk about me come next time.
Yeah, like, next time.
Here's the concepts that I've been working on there.
And does that include like water mines and things like that, and buoys and stuff like that?
Buoys and depth charges.
And depth charges.
Yeah, like, you know, we're to sort of step aside for a second and not talk about what's practical or what, you know, we're just to say like, okay, for a second, I'm not gonna be like a dev, right? I'm just gonna be like a normal non-dev, of non-Foxhole dev. I think it'd be cool to see, like, you know, the thought is cool. Like if there was full-fledged, you know, if there were like submarines and like battleships and like mines, and then you had like, and then you had like supply lines that you had to protect.
Yeah.
And then you can like ambush ships with like submarines and things of that sort. That's really cool to think about. So the non-dev side of me is like, that sounds cool. And then the dev side of me is like, how would all that actually fit into the game? And there's a lot to figure out, right? Yeah.
That's really cool. I have Zach Reaver actually has a lot to say about decay in general, and it kind of ties in with the concept, like if we're eventually doing like a builder update, right? He has a suggestion about, for instance, adding the name of who built something into the wall or something like that, so the builders get more appreciation, because he's complaining that builders are very unappreciated because it's a thankless job in which you're hammering, and sometimes because of decay, because there's so many things that prevent decay, it's not worth it to like try to save something that is at 20%. You just like let it explode and build it again, you know, instead of spending time. So are there plans in the short term or long term? What is the plans in regards to decay systems or adding other structures that prevent decay and making the life of builders in particular, not logi, but builders in particular, more rewarding?
Yeah, I think that definitely a lot of this belongs to like the base building, the larger plans we have for that. I think we want to address that in a way that is natural to the game. Like we don't want to add any kind of like artificial, like here you go, like you get a badge for making 100 walls type of deal. But we'd rather do it in a way where, let's say, just as an example, right? Like you could build a base that is more like permanent, that has a very low chance of being like wiped out, that could last like throughout the entire war and to actually mean something. And you know, of course, it'll be good if we figure out a way for you to be recognized for that as well. And we've even thought about like other ideas. I don't want to get too far into it right now, but possibly extending beyond the current war. So that the satisfaction comes from like, hey, maybe I can build this giant like Maginot Wall type thing, and a part of that actually lasts over this war, and it actually leads in the next war. Obviously, there's a million questions that have to be answered to implement something like that, but that's sort of the direction we would at least right now we're thinking we would prefer something like that over more like artificial type of systems. Because if you knew that your base would not just be gone, like you know, I mean, to take a step back, I guess it's also important, especially if you're a new player. Like wars used to not last overnight. You build something, there was zero chance it will be there the next day.
Yeah.
Zero. It would literally be zero, right? And then we moved from that to world conquest. Okay, there's a good chance it's going to be there the next day, but you know, maybe you'll get destroyed, and then there's like the structure decay, and there's no way to stop it. And then we provided a way to actually stop the structure decay. So now it's like, okay, it's not only can it last a couple of days, but there's actually a chance if you put your work into it that it can last even longer than that. And we're gonna keep on making it better, right? So this is not like overnight. It's funny because you ever just asked that question like 2 years ago, and then you look at where we are right now, it would seem like there was a drastic change, but it happened gradually. And I think in the same way, like we're still gonna make it better, right? We're not done yet, and I think that making things more permanent, more persistent is definitely one of our #1 goals of this year. So that idea, that question strikes kind of right into that goal, right? Yeah.
There was in regards, well, still kind of tied to it, Patrick Mann. He was asking, particularly for people that are colorblind, they might have a hard time differentiating between defenses, for instance. And of course, we can always add colorblind modes in the game, but something that would fit would be what about the idea of having faction-specific defense models, so that the walls from the Wardens are different than the walls from the Colonists. I don't know if you guys remember the time when nothing was different. All the vehicles were the same, all the models were the same. God, that was a nightmare when the Colonials and Wardens were exactly the same. Do you think there's any chance that we're gonna have like the defenses being also differentiated, like the
I'd
armament?
love that.
It would be fantastic.
I definitely would like that, and I think that it's in the cards. Although a word of caution is that like things like that is a cost that is carried with us for a very long time, right? So like even if we were to do it, the timing is important, because when you put something like that in, what it means is that everything will be slower, right? So that if we wanted to sort of, let's say we had that in there and we want to change something massive across the game, right? It would take twice as long for some of these tasks. Yeah. And we've learned from the past, like some things sometimes seem very cool, right? And it's like, oh, let's just do this one thing because it's going to make this thing look like much better, or it's going to help with this specific cause. And then later on, it's like it slows down everything, including fixing bugs. And in terms of the number of new bugs, there's a maintenance cost. And what ends up happening is like, wait a minute, like we can't just fix all these bugs so easily. We can't just add these new features so easily. Why? Because we made this one thing have a maintenance cost. Yeah. So it's like, as cool as it is, and I'm not saying that we're not going to do it, but
it's not as simple.
It's not as simple as making a model. It's actually I would argue that the cost of making the model, yes, it is big, it's hard,
but in comparison to the cost of upkeep is way lower.
Upkeep and maintenance. I mean, you know, like how many animations do you have to maintain? And if we were to one day say, hey, HB, we're gonna just change the character slightly, you have to change all those animations. Yeah. Like it would take weeks, right? And I think this is something that is sort of not necessarily like an obvious thing. I mean, it wasn't even obvious to us at the beginning.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's the kind of thing that you learn as like in a game like this, as you make it. It's like, oh, this thing that I thought a year ago that was like, oh yeah, for sure. Like, why not just add another model for different walls? Absolutely. It might have a complete, like, a huge factor down the line that we were just not expecting.
And I think that for like one thing we're facing now is maintaining the maps, right? The more maps there are, the harder it gets. And one of the things that we're trying to do is figure out ways on how we can automate some of these things so that the chance for like making mistakes is much lower, right?
Okay, this is gonna be our last question, so please send something really cool. There was a question previously. I'm sorry, I forgot who it was. Let's see if I can find it. It was a question for Julian. I'm gonna have another question. From all the concepts of bigger and better old tech, is there any possibility of focusing some concept art on smaller stuff from the pre-war era?
Yes, Matt has assembled a list of large, medium, and small items that he wants me to explore in terms of like, what did technology look like back then? What did like a rare old like pocket watch that some warden general had? Like, what would that look like? Can you stumble across it? You know, like a lore item that we have now in game, and kind of fleshing those out more. All the way from like a pocket watch all the way up to this like massive tank or something else. So yes, there is a list.
Cool. Since I'm the one choosing, I'm gonna choose one about animations. But that question is for you, Mark. Yeah, you'll see. Speaking of animations, can we get animations of model opening, watching maps, idle, taking a smoke, dropping down, and giving the captains 50 push-ups?
If I have to do programming, then you have to do the animation.
No, it's basically the question is for Mark because unfortunately. I remember I mentioned this when the emotes were first implemented, but people might not know. There were some technical limitations on the kind of emotes that I was able to do. I would love to do any of these like pretty much role-playing animations like smoking and playing cards and like playing an instrument or doing push-ups or exercise or all that. There were some technical limitations on what I could do at the time. Some of these limitations have been over, some of them have not because they're necessarily hard, just because they like whatever time that we are taking doing that, taking away those limitations, just a little bit less time fixing bugs, for instance. It's not undoable, but I would love to do those.
Also, everybody on the art team, specifically Adam, has wanted the player to hold a physical map when you're looking at your map.
Oh my god!
For like since the beginning of the project, but we just haven't gotten around to doing it yet.
Yeah. Okay. Last questions.
No, Mark didn't answer the animation stuff.
Oh yeah. When are we gonna have time to do that?
No, I don't need to answer.
Come on, Mark. Last question. By Moon Forever. When can we get a dev stream with the whole Foxhole team?
I don't know. When? That's a good question.
Once we're not all sick at random.
That is the first hurdle to pass. Yes.
Like, how many people can we cram in this room? Like.
It already smells bad enough in here with just 3 people.
Yeah. So hopefully we did a little office tour with for our anniversary stream, which was the last dev stream of last year. But even on that one, it was not everybody because Nuba and KFC were not in that because they were not in the office at that moment.
Maybe we can do a stream out there.
We could do a stream out there. That would be really cool. Yeah. So, let me know if you guys are interested on something like that.
The 10 feet to the left stream.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you very much, everybody, for submitting questions. If you're watching this on YouTube, this dev stream happens every second Tuesday at 2 p.m. EST. At twitch.tv/foxholegame. If you're not part of the Discord community, join our Discord as well. Also, I'm gonna put the link somewhere there. Any last words? No?
Stay foxy.
I'll see you guys on the next one. Have a great 2 weeks, guys. Bye bye.